what would be the impact of restoring the oceans if we do that at the full scale that we intend to?
Well, ocean restoration is restoring the ocean back to its natural state of health. And to understand what that means, you have to take on faith that the facts show that the ocean has declined in its productivity. So if you think of the ocean like an ocean that's a forest or a pasture where plants live, ocean plants, plankton is the big one. The ocean has lost an enormous amount of its plant life, its phytoplankton, and everybody in the world knows about the Amazon rainforest and the problem facing the Amazon rainforest, which is a global issue because humanity has destroyed 20% of the Amazon rainforest. But the ocean pastures and the phytoplankton have been in a state of decline due to high and rising CO2. And the data shows, we have good data going back to about 1950. And to put it in the context of the Amazon rainforest, in each 5-year span of time since 1950, the ocean has lost an amount of biomass equal to the entire Amazon. So we've lost 14 Amazons worth of plant life and biodiversity since 1950 in the world's oceans. And hardly everybody in the world is alarmed, in the environmental world, is alarmed at the loss of 1/5 of one Amazon. But they don't seem to be aware of the loss of 14 entire Amazons in that big blue place on this strange blue planet, which is 72% blue. Because we don't live there, we live on land. But a good friend of mine who recently died, who was one of the top scientists, salmon scientists in the world, he once said to me, he said, "Russ," he says, "who speaks for the fish?" Right? He says, somebody has to speak for the fish, right? And the fish are the fish live in the ocean, and they live in the ocean pastures. And it's the ocean pastures that need to be restored. And we started working on this a long time ago. We put the first ocean pasture satellite in orbit in 1978, right? A long time ago. We put the most recent ocean pasture satellite in orbit in June of this year. So it's not that we haven't been working on this project. The scientific community globally has been working diligently on it. And guess what? We figured it out, right? We know what the source of the problem is, and we know what the solution is. And the late, great John Martin, who is my hero in ocean science, in the 1970s, he helped design the first ocean pasture satellite. And another guy, a NASA engineer, I can't remember his name, it's not on the tip of my tongue, but I remember him telling me the story about how when they got the first images from the satellite of the plankton blooms in the ocean, he called John Martin up and he says, "We got the shot," all right? Right? And it's exactly as you said it would be, right? So, and the cause of the collapse of the ocean pastures is that everybody understands a pasture on land that's covered with grass. If the rain falls, you have a healthy crop of grass, right? And that's wonderful for the terrestrial pasture on land. But in the ocean, the grass of the ocean is phytoplankton. It lives in water. So it doesn't need another drop of water to fall, but it needs something, very desperately. And what it needs is the dust to fall. So the ocean gives up water, and that water nourishes the land. And there's a bargain that Mother Nature has, right? And she says, you don't give without receiving. So land gives up dust to keep the ocean healthy. However, our high and rising CO2 makes the grass grow. So everywhere in the world where dust blows, the grass scientists have reported that the grass is staying green and covering the ground for 6 weeks longer every at the start of every dry season. And more grass growing means less dust blowing. And it's that dust that's no longer blown up in the wind. That has I'll just speak louder. And so it's the dust blowing in the wind that is the most vital element for the most abundant form of life on this planet, which is the grass of the ocean pasture, the phytoplankton. And so John Martin, when he worked this out, he was a fabulous ocean chemist. We're back. When John Martin worked out the mathematics and the chemistry of this back in the 70s and 80s, he said, wow, the ocean can be restored to health if we give it back the iron that we have denied it. And how much iron is that? Well, that iron is 1/2 of one shipload of, you probably can't see this, of red iron dust, right? Mineral dust, right? And so this very amount of dust is enough to turn the entire ocean, the ocean out here for a kilometer green, right? That I have in my hand. And so John Martin's, he said, he was a great professor, and he always had to tell a good story to keep the students' attention. And he said, so to tell the story, he said, he knew that dust makes the plankton grow. The plankton takes carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. The carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is the greenhouse gas blanket that's causing global warming. And in the 1980s, John Martin said, global warming's the biggest problem we have, but the plankton can take care of that for us. Give me 1/2 a shipload of iron, I'll give you another ice age, right? That's the power of phytoplankton. And the phytoplankton have repeatedly, over 1 million years and many ice ages, received that dust from changes in the climate of the planet. And every time the dust blew in the wind and the plankton grew in the ocean, the planet went into an ice age, right? But that was when we had far less CO2. The carbon dioxide blanket was not as thick as it is today. So it was, when the plankton were causing us to go cold, they didn't pull the greenhouse gas blanket off of us. They pulled the greenhouse gas sheet, right? There was only a very thin covering. So, what I do now is I've done large projects. My biggest project was with a group of native peoples in British Columbia, the Haida people, and a village, a tiny native peoples village of only 800 people, children, women, and men, right? 800 in total, who I'd worked with for many years doing reforestation, forest ecology work. They asked me, and they called themselves, the Haida people called themselves the people of the salmon. And the salmon were all gone. It used to be 40 years ago, every single village family had at least one fisherman in the family who lived off fish. And today there are nobody has a job as a salmon fisherman in the village anymore. The fish are gone, right? And so they came to me and they said, well, we need to bring back the fish, right? And we think that they knew I was working on this ocean dusting, right? Ocean restoration work. And they pleaded with me to come to the village and bring back the fish with them. So in 2012, we'd worked for years. We had the National Research Council of Canada helping to support the project. But it was the village of 800 people that dug into their village trust fund and put up $2 million, which was an enormous sum of money for a tiny, remote native people's village on a remote island in the North Pacific Ocean to try to bring back the fish. So myself and 11 tribal members, we took 100 tons of dust out to the ocean, and we sprinkled and we made muddy water on the deck of a large fish boat, and we spread that muddy water across 100 by 100 kilometers, or 10,000 square kilometers, right? That's that's half the size of Israel, right? And and because it's the oceans in motion, that the replenished iron region grew to about maybe as much as 50,000 square kilometers. So more than twice the size of Israel, the area of Israel. And guess what? The ocean turned immediately from blue to green. All of ocean life came back. When we were doing the preliminary work, we were counting seabirds, and we would see 2 or 3 seabirds a few times a day. We were hundreds of miles from shore out in the middle of the North Pacific Gulf of Alaska. When we finished the dusting cycle and the pasture was in bloom, we were doing science work. We shut down the science mission at 2 a.m. in the morning, and we were bushed for the hard work all day, and I shut the main engines off on the boat, and it was a calm sea, and we were just adrift in the darkness. And I woke up, I couldn't sleep because it was my project, and I ended up, sitting up on the bridge deck, up on the bow of the boat, and just before dawn came, I could hear this strange sound building, right? And even though we had some generators on the boat, which were very loud, all of a sudden I could hear nothing but this sound that was surrounding the boat. And it was birds in the air with their wings flapping and issuing out their bird calls. And so as the sun rose and the dawn came up and the light came up, there were tens of thousands of seabirds swirling around the boat that was adrift in the middle of the pasture.
Russ, I want to ask you. We have 1 trillion ton of CO2 to remove from the atmosphere.
Right.
If we were to deploy ocean restoration at full scale, how many tons of CO2 we can remove from the atmosphere every year?
Well, it's a good number, and there's 50 years of scientific data, right, to support the number. So the data has spoken to us, and we know that number really well. And we know that if we restore the ocean to the historic levels of health and abundance, that the additional photosynthetic effect will. My good friend Sir David King, who used to be the chief scientist of the UK, is widely acclaimed as one of the principal authors of the Paris Treaty. Sir David has spoken up. We were together at the Royal Engineers building in London not so long ago, and on a panel, and that very question came up, and they asked Sir David what was the number, and he passed the mic to me, and I said, no, David, you're the one who's Sir David, and you're the professor emeritus at Cambridge. What's the number? And I passed it back to him, and he said, well, that's about 30 billion tons a year, right? Give or take a little. Well, that's the whole of humanity is responsible for putting 40 billion tons of carbon dioxide in the air every year. And so we can't fix the whole problem, but 3/4, pretty good, right? And it's fast, right? Plankton blooms fast. It's a bloom. It blooms fast. So next year we're trying to get 10 projects out to sea. And, that I think very conservatively that will remove 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and repurpose it into ocean life. And the alternative is that 1 billion tons of CO2 in the atmosphere is going to produce 1 billion tons of acid in the ocean.